What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today I wanted to talk about the Indiana Pacers. This is a very similar video to the one I did yesterday about the Washington Wizards. I kind of talked about the Pacers in that video, where the Wizards are sort of nipping at the heels of some of those teams at the bottom of the play-in race, and the Pacers are actually in danger of falling out entirely, falling out of the playoff picture entirely. It's obviously not happened yet. They still have a couple of games up on the Wizards and the Bulls and the Raptors and all those other teams that are racing for that 10th spot. The Pacers are currently in 9th. But I kind of wanted to talk about them, give an overview for the rest of their season, and see where things might go from them, because if they don't play well the rest of the year, there is actually a chance that they fall out of the playoffs entirely, and that would not be ideal. So the Pacers are a small market team. Not a lot of people are going to be talking about them. They're one of the smallest markets in the league, and as far as teams in the league go, I think the Pacers are the one that maybe gets the least attention out of anybody, and there's really no, crazy reason for that other than they're being in a small market. They're a good team. They're an average team. They've been good for the past 10 years or so. They've had national relevance back when they had Paul George, and then, for a couple years after Paul George and they traded him away, they've actually been pretty good. They had Domantas Sabonis, who has emerged as an all-star, Malcolm Brogdon that they signed, and he's been playing well, and TJ Warren had those good performances in the bubble, and you've come up with a lot of diamonds in the rough here over the past couple of years for the Pacers. So people don't talk about them, but it's just because they are, one of the smallest markets in the league, and I just feel like for whatever reason, the Pacers are one team that more than any other team just doesn't ever get talked about. I mean, you can look at other small markets out there like the Grizzlies or the Jazz or whatever, but at least those teams I feel like just get mentioned more in the national stage than the Pacers do, and this is a solid team. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing exceptional either. They're about a 500 basketball team. They have been for the past couple of years. I mean, they've been a little bit above that, right? An above average team in the playoffs every single year, but this season they've taken a little bit of a step back, and you can point at a couple of different things for that, right? They've had quite a bit of injuries to deal with. TJ Warren only played 4 games this season and broke his foot, and it was recently reported that he will miss the rest of the year, so he will only have played 4 games this season. You just had Miles Turner go down with an injury. He'll be out indefinitely. It's unclear at the moment whether that's going to be the rest of the year or if it's just going to be a short-term thing. It's pretty unknown at this point, so maybe you lost Miles Turner for the rest of the year. Malcolm Brogdon is recently back after having missed a little while. Sabonis has been in and out of the lineup with some little ticky-tack injuries, so they've been dealing with a lot of stuff, and it kind of makes sense as to why they're not super good, because I feel like the Eastern Conference has gotten better around them, where they've sort of stayed where they're at. And so, it's kind of a question of where do they go from here? Where does this roster go? And what is this, how much does the rest of the season really matter for them? Just considering that this is clearly a team that's not going to win the title. They're not going to do anything exceptional. I'm sure they'd like to make the playoffs, but if they do, they'll probably lose in the first round, and maybe they get swept. Who knows? So it's kind of an interesting thing with them, where they're kind of stuck in the middle like a lot of these other teams are, and they have been there for a couple of years, so haven't really had a chance to get a lottery pick. But it's a smart front office. They tend to draft well. They tend to make smart moves in free agency and smart trades, so maybe they can build a contender out of this still, but it's sort of a weird spot to be in. So as you can see here, they're currently the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, currently 2 games back of the Charlotte Hornets for the 8th spot, and then 2 games ahead of the Bulls and the Wizards for that 10th seed, 2.5 up on the Raptors as well. So they have a pretty, healthy buffer either way, and it seems like they've been hanging out at that 9th seed for a little while now. Kind of been, for the past couple of months, if I'm remembering correctly, it feels like the Pacers have just been in that same spot where the teams above them stick above them and the teams below them stick below them, and that's kind of just where they're at. They've been the 9th seed for most of the season. So, it's not like it's likely that they're going to end up falling out of the play-in entirely. It still feels like they're probably going to end up being there at the end of things, but it's a possibility, right? The Wizards, like I talked about yesterday, have been playing really well recently. They've won, I think, 7 out of 8, I said. So, if they continue to do that, they'll be able to potentially pass Indiana here. The Bulls have not been playing well recently. They've kind of been trending in the opposite direction, but they have Vucevic still trying to figure things out, and if they can get Zach LaVine back relatively soon, then maybe there's a chance that they could put together a run near the end of the year. Raptors, I'm still not entirely convinced that they're actually trying to win for the rest of the season. It feels to me like it's more of a tank, but who knows with them, right? It's a team with a championship core, and they still got a lot of good players, so maybe the Raptors put together a run down the stretch and end up putting some pressure on. So 2-game lead is nice, but it's absolutely not insurmountable. And if they end up struggling here, they could potentially fall out, which would certainly be interesting because this is a team that has been in the playoffs, and for a large majority of the past 10 seasons, they've been in there and doing well. So it would be an interesting thing for the Pacers to be out and dealing with a lottery pick and potentially faced with a rebuild here, just because they've been a very average NBA team for so long. I do want to also mention that they do not have the tiebreaker with the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls won the season series 2-1, and there's no matchups left on the year. The Raptors currently is tied 1-1, and they play them on the last day of the season, so that could end up being huge in terms of standings if the Raptors end up getting up there. And they play the Wizards twice left, and that will determine the season series as well. They lost the first game to the Wizards, so they'll have to win both of those games in order to have the tiebreaker over Washington. And those are going to be big anyway, considering the Wizards are right on their tail. So let's look at the rest of their schedule. But they might not have the tiebreaker against any of those teams behind them, and that would be unfortunate. The next 3 games are pretty easy. Looking at that, you got OKC and Detroit, both at home, at Orlando. Those three of the worst teams in the league. The Thunder have lost like 11 in a row. The Magic suck. The Pistons suck. So those are, probably going to be easy wins. Nothing is easy in the NBA, but as easy as it gets, and hopefully they can go 3-0 over their next 3. Portland Trailblazers, Brooklyn Nets in a row. That's tough. Those games are both at home, though. The Nets are kind of banged up right now. Who knows how long KD is going to be out with that hamstring, or I guess that's a thigh bruise for him. But James Harden has a hamstring thing. He's going to be out for a while. So it might just be Kyrie Irving and the Nets. Now, obviously, they're still very good, but at least it makes it a little more winnable home game. Trailblazers, Damian Lillard will probably be back by then. So that's a tougher game as well. But then they go at OKC. They play OKC twice the rest of the year, so that's not too bad. Wizards, like I said, they play the Wizards twice, once at home, once on the road. Those are going to be huge in determining these standings here, because if the Wizards can win those 2 games, that makes up the 2-game deficit right now, because like I said, they're only 2 games back of the Pacers, and those 2 games make up that deficit. So as long as they can keep pace and win those 2, the Wizards are going to be up. But the Pacers can do themselves a big favor if they beat the Wizards in those games, and then they potentially knock them down and get the tiebreaker, and you're going to be fine, right? Couple of games in between those 2, the Hawks and the Kings. Kings have not been playing well recently. I think they're going to basically be mailing it in, packing it, tanking the rest of the year. Hawks are up there in the standings. They're a pretty good team. Cavs suck. The last 4 games of the season, though, that's going to be a tough stretch for them. They do have all 3 at home. So the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Lakers all at home. We're presuming that all 3 of those teams are going to be fully healthy by then. Maybe a couple of them will have a playoff seed locked up, considering that's right near the end of the season. So you might not face any of those teams at full strength, but who knows? They might be playing for something near the end of the year there. So those 3 games are going to be certainly very tough, and that might come into play huge when determining where their seed is going to be. And then the Toronto Raptors, like I mentioned, last game of the season, that will determine the tiebreaker between the 2 teams. So if for whatever reason the Raptors do end up making a run and getting up there, that could potentially be a deciding factor into who gets one of those play-in spots. Now, like I said, I don't believe the Raptors are really going to be a threat. I feel like they'd rather tank the rest of the season, but at least it's still a possibility. So this schedule doesn't look too hard, but those 2 games against the Wizards especially might be 2 of the biggest games of the Pacers season for sure, because that is going to go a long way towards deciding these play-in seeds. But hey, honestly, even if they don't make it this year, it's really not the end of the world, because this Pacers team, I think, is one that might be more in need of a lottery pick than we realize. They've dealt with a lot of injury this year. They haven't had all their best players on the floor at all times. But I feel like the clock might be sort of ticking on this. They're a good team, they're an average team, but I think we can all agree there is no championship upside to the Pacers, so it doesn't feel like they're, really a threat to do anything. They're not a threat to sign any top-level free agent. They have to draft their talent because, like I mentioned, they're a small market. Nobody really wants to go play there. So they have to draft their talent, and right now on the roster, they're good but not great. And you might get into a situation where you have to be trading players. I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting that any of these players like Sabonis or Brogdon or Miles Turner or any other good guys are going to request a trade out of Indiana. I mean, I guess that's a possibility, but that's not really on anybody's radar right now. But it certainly maybe could happen in a couple of years if this team continues to struggle. So you're at a point where the team is okay, but it's not great. You're at a risk of losing talent. And if you get in the lottery, you get the 9th or 10th best lottery odds and potentially jump up into the top 4. I think this is a pretty solid draft, and if they end up getting a really young prospect, that could go a long way towards energizing this franchise. Just because it feels like they're sort of stuck in the mud right now, kind of in the middle of things, and getting a young guy in there would really energize this. And if they don't end up getting a super high lottery pick, then they're probably just going to be in a similar situation next year. It's hard for me to see how they're going to improve this roster. Like I mentioned earlier, they do generally draft well and execute well in free agency, so they might have a couple of tricks up their sleeves, but there's not a move to be made for a superstar, really, and I don't think that they're willing to go into a full tank and trade away a lot of these players, because like I said, this is a good roster. They have a lot of good talent here. It's just not a championship level upside. So I think, honestly, the best thing for the Pacers, I think the best thing for the franchise would be to try to get a lottery pick. I'm not suggesting they should tank. I don't think that they will. This is not a franchise that has really done that at all, tried to lose games on purpose. But if they do end up outside of the play-in tournament, or even with one of those lower play-in seeds and ends up with some decent lottery odds, I think that could potentially be better for the franchise long term, because adding one of these top prospects this year would be really, really nice for them. But yeah, I think that's about all I have on the Indiana Pacers and their danger of falling out of the play-in game. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Pacers and their direction moving forward. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.